Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I have a special guest with me today, Chris Yim, who's the CEO and co-founder of LibertyX. Chris, it's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Chris, I'm super excited to speak to you because we've been hearing all the great news about LibertyX and the positioning of the ATMs in pharmacies such as CVS and of course 7-Eleven. So lots to go through, but I wanted to start with your background. Tell us about yourself. Where are you from? Where are you currently living? And how did you start LibertyX?
Sure, happy to. I think I have a pretty typical, American background. I was born in New Jersey. My parents were an accountant and a scientist, so that might have provided a little bit of that DNA for how I got to where I am. But growing up, I lived in North Andover for most of my life. It's a small suburb, about 30,000 people. I moved around quite a bit, based on my dad's job, but ended up going to MIT for my undergrad in chemical engineering, and I think I developed analytical toolkit there and started just thinking about first principles and what really made sense to me and what I wanted to pursue. After college, I worked in investment banking, once again kind of broadening that analytical toolkit, and then worked in venture capital for a few years. And then I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, and decided to take some time off before starting business school. This was late 2012, early 2013, and that's when I stumbled into the Bitcoin rabbit hole, if you will.
Got it. So when you first discovered Bitcoin or crypto, did someone tell you about it, or did you see it on a forum? I'm always interested in folks' first initial introduction to the market.
Yeah. So at that time, I've always been interested in trading stocks. At the dinner table, my parents always used to put on, the daily financial market summary. Grew up listening to Jim Cramer's Mad Money, so a lot of that was in my background in DNA. So for me, it was the price movement of Bitcoin that really drew me to it initially, and this was back when it was sub $100. So it was moving 10%, and it was really interesting, and it was cheap enough, I guess, just in absolute dollar terms, that I wanted to get a little bit smarter about it, try buying it for myself, and that's really when I came across that first pain point. This was pre Coinbase, pre really any online exchange. So the only way you could purchase Bitcoin was a site called Local Bitcoins, which I'm sure you and your listeners are familiar with. But basically, Craigslist for Bitcoin, where you coordinate a meetup in person and exchange dollars for Bitcoin.
Wow. And obviously you're holding Bitcoin in your portfolio. Are you holding anything else within crypto assets?
Yeah. Just like stocks in the beginning, I was trading a lot, just trying to get comfortable seeing how different cryptocurrencies were different. I don't do that anymore. I think, there's a reason there are professional investors out there, even in the equities markets. It's really hard to outperform. And when you have something that's, a transformative, possibly once in a generation asset class like Bitcoin, you don't really need to trade in and out. I think from my perspective, I see a lot of potential. I think there are, 4 or 5 different use cases that could really drive Bitcoin appreciation. So I have a little Bitcoin. Most of my money I put into the company. I still think that, from a personal perspective, that's the best ROI. What we're building here is something that leverages Bitcoin, but also is a business in itself. And I think that a lot of people that will always kind of point to Bitcoin, oh, it doesn't generate cash flows, how can it be worth anything? I think having a company where you can actually make money just gives you that second level of confidence and security.
Sure, and that absolutely makes sense. I think given the opportunity that you have and building this company around Bitcoin and the crypto asset classes makes sense. And you almost sounded like Warren Buffett there when you said it doesn't generate cash flow.
Yeah. I mean, I think for value investors, right, that's something that's a tough struggle. But I don't think that you need to generate cash flows to be valuable necessarily. And that's kind of this big dichotomy, this big way of, is the traditional mindset the right way to evaluate all assets. And I think that's why there's an opportunity here, because obviously you have a lot of people that are in the old school Warren Buffett camp. And then you have kind of people who don't have an opinion. And then a lot of the Bitcoiners who are like, no, this is actually how you should be looking at things. And, that's where we, before we got started, stock to flow, a lot of these other things emerged from.
Sure. So let's talk about LibertyX. How, I know you're the co-founder, you're obviously the CEO. How did you and your other co-founders, how did the idea come about, and how did the company get started?
Sure. So after you tried buying Bitcoin for the first time, kind of brainstorm ways to improve it, but really didn't do too much with it. I always wanted to start a company, but I knew the difficulties of being a solo founder. So I ended up starting my MBA at Wharton in mid 2013, and I met Kyle, who eventually became my co-founder. Basically, when I was at Wharton, all I did was talk about Bitcoin, how interesting it was, and just try to get people to form a community and talk and brainstorm ideas. Kyle was really the only other person that even gave me the time of day. And really the aha moment was, we're preparing for some exams. It's 3 a.m. That's when China back then was trading. Sure. So you would see this crazy price volatility, and we were just like, all we were talking about in class and lecture was Bitcoin. And after a certain point, we're like, what are we doing here? We should build a company, take advantage of this opportunity. And that's really what we did. For both of us, it was really difficult to purchase Bitcoin. So that's the area that we really wanted to tackle first, since to really become money 2.0, you have to be able to get in and out of it easily.
Got it. That absolutely makes sense. I love those entrepreneur stories, and how just conversations is like, let's start a company. That's awesome, man. Love it. Now we've heard that LibertyX are positioning these ATMs, the ones you have like right behind you, in CVS and the RiteAids and the 7-Elevens. So how did that come about? I know there's probably certain things you can't share, but tell us about the locations. Is it nationwide throughout the U.S.? Is it in the rollout phase? Can you give us an overview of that?
Sure. So a lot of it just comes back to how we built the company historically. In February 2014, when we launched the first Bitcoin ATM in the country, it was a cash kiosk that we had here in Boston South Station. So one machine that was connected to the internet that accepted cash and sent Bitcoin. And really what we've been focused on is expanding that footprint, making it more scalable, and covering more of the country so that people can purchase Bitcoin instantly near them. So from there, we moved to a cashier integration model where we actually built our own POS software that sits on the computer. So really any retailer that had a cashier could accept cash payments, and we would handle the purchase of Bitcoin. Fast forward a little bit, what we were really focused on is how can we really scale and go after the market. Adding locations one by one is great. And, we have a very significant footprint from those cashiers. But for us, it was really about, there's 300 plus million Americans spread across 50 states. How do you have a solution that can adequately allow people to, partake in this new ecosystem? And what was crazy is all along we're hearing about people that are, driving 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour to go and purchase Bitcoin. And to me, that was kind of amazing that you had this almost really, really passionate group of users. So if you're able to provide something for them, we saw a really big opportunity there. And so we talked to all these enterprise partners, and eventually, after having the same conversation over and over again, Bitcoin not dying, Bitcoin price appreciating, a lot of them came back. And that was basically what happened with the traditional ATMs. Eventually, we landed partnerships with Genmega and Hyosung. If you look at the non-bank ATMs, so not B of A, not Chase, all those other ATMs are probably one of those two manufacturers. So we entered partnerships with them, and we were actually pre-installed as part of the software. So any ATM at your convenience store, mall, local shop, you could buy Bitcoin from now with LibertyX. And going to earlier this year in July, it's kind of the culmination of all that with our chain retailer partnerships. So actually, one clarification: it's not an ATM in those stores in a CVS RiteAid. What it is we create a barcode in our app that the cashier scans. So what we're really doing, right? If you think about buying Bitcoin, you're just really accepting a irreversible cash payment or payment instrument. So whether it's cash or a debit card, and then we're sending Bitcoin to your wallet. So what happens at a CVS RiteAid is you scan that barcode, you give the cash to the cashier, then we know how much Bitcoin to send to you, and we send it to your wallet. But what's really exciting about that is everybody, I think 93% of the country lives within a few miles of a CVS or RiteAid. So that's really allowed us to go after that last mile opportunity and provide something where probably previous to that, people didn't really have a good option, or they had to do that drive or pick an inferior option.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's amazing because to your point, these retailers and pharmacies and whatever, there are so many of them, and certainly within very close to communities and so forth. There's one literally 5 minutes away from me. I can go there. So I can walk in there, find the normal ATM, if that's correct, scan the respective barcode once I have the LibertyX app, and I can make a purchase of Bitcoin.
Yeah, so there's no ATM in a CVS or RiteAid. So okay. All you're doing in the app is selecting the CVS or RiteAid location. You're giving us your Bitcoin address.
Oh, got
We give you in return a barcode that you go to the cashier and the ATM, and once they scan it, you hand over the cash amount that you want to purchase with, and once that's done, we send you the Bitcoin.
Got it. Wow. Okay. So how does, as far as, and this is a question from the community of folks, we know Bitcoin is a great store of value and so forth, but there's still some scalability things being worked on, like the Lightning Network and so on and so forth. We saw in 2017, the network got a little bit clogged, right, over time, just because of a lot of transactions. So how do you handle that real-time value of Bitcoin if I give you the cash? And can you tell me a bit, take me behind the curtain a bit and how that is done?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say two things are important there. One is we're an instant service. So as soon as you pay cash or use your debit card at one of our ATM locations, we send you the Bitcoin immediately. I think it has to be that way. We don't want to hold on to, we don't hold customer funds. Another thing worth pointing out is we don't offer wallet services. So I mentioned earlier that you have to give us your Bitcoin address. Part of that is it's a very clean separation between what we provide and what the customer has. But also, I think it's best practices of the business movement of not your keys, not your Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. I think there's a little more nuance than that. But once people have their own wallets, they really understand that for the first time they can actually control and hold the value in themselves. And I think that's a really strong and powerful concept. The other part is, I think, the transaction fees, minor fees, and all that certainly have increased over time. And probably 2 or 3 cycles ago, when the fees really spiked, one thing we noticed was that it was a really poor experience to just pick a fee, and consumers had to be waited around for their transaction to confirm. So what we did actually was we were one of the first companies to allow consumers to specify which fee they wanted. We called it, I think, low or standard and high. And basically, we give the option depending on the use case, right? If you want your Bitcoin to confirm faster because you want to go purchase something or you want to send it to another address, it's a higher fee. Otherwise, it's a standard fee. And if you want to maximize your sats or your Bitcoin, then you want to pay a lower fee, and you don't really care if it confirms 8, 12, 24 hours. And so that really helped because people could self-discriminate onto what they wanted and get their Bitcoin sooner or later. And then obviously, when SegWit occurred, we were one of the first to adopt it. Things like batching. Lightning is very interesting. We're not generally one of the earliest movers around that because we need to see a little more adoption. We don't offer wallets yet, right?
Sure.
So we want to see more consumer Lightning wallets, but obviously very interesting. I think it'll really mobilize a lot of the use cases, especially for lower dollar transactions, which is great for people that don't really have access to that in the traditional financial system.
Got it. Makes sense. And I love that you give the options there for the respective fees. That's awesome. Now the flip side of the token, so to speak, we just heard news that now you can go sell your Bitcoin at the respective locations. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So for the first, this is we're entering year 7, I think, in the business. Probably for the first 6 years, and even today, it's been much harder to purchase Bitcoin than it is to sell it. But one thing we're seeing more and more, especially with the price appreciation, is, well, how do I know that, how can I get out of Bitcoin? So it's not necessarily that consumers want to sell it, but having the option to sell it, especially at the same service they purchased from, gives them that added comfort. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what's holding back a lot of the marginal consumers. It's not that they don't see the value, they just don't want to get trapped, or they want to have a plan that they can come in and get out as easily. So for us, that was something we always wanted to do, but it actually ended up being a very natural fit with our existing footprint. So what do ATMs do? Well, they're very good at withdrawing cash, right? Dispensing cash.
Yeah.
So in building our footprint just for the buy Bitcoin side, we actually built this infrastructure that will really allow us to facilitate the sell transaction as well. So earlier last week, we announced the capability where consumers can sell Bitcoin to us and withdraw the cash from our national network of ATMs. And basically how that works is you use our app to save the transaction. You tell us how much cash you want to withdraw. You send us, we give you a Bitcoin quote of how much Bitcoin to send. You send it to us. We give you an order number that you enter on the ATM. You go to the ATM, enter your order number, and just like that, the cash is dispensed.
Wow. And I love that. And you brought up a great point that you need the off ramp as well, not just the on ramp, right? So if the price of Bitcoin's going up and I want to cash it out because I want to get some cash for whatever, I can easily do that. I'm in CVS picking up something. I can do that if I want, because it's, I'm sure people are checking the prices, especially with it going up now, right? It just makes it so much more easier. So I love that. Now, just to confirm, the respective retailers that you're in, it's CVS, RiteAid, and 7-Eleven right now. Is there anything else? And could you hint towards maybe what other retailers might be on the horizon?
Sure. So if you just look at I think one takeaway is if you look at the companies that are interested in Bitcoin, or anybody interested in Bitcoin, I think everyone, especially at the board level and senior management level, they need to have a strategy because this is one of the fastest growing industries. So I don't know of any large Fortune 100 company that probably hasn't at least had the conversation exploring if there's something they can do in this space. So if you just go in your town and you look at the big retailers, I think any one of those could be potentially future partners for us. And I think that's really exciting. It's one of those things where it's kind of like Apple, Microsoft, or Google, Microsoft. Once one company does something, their natural competitors are like, oh, well, what are we going to do in this space? And us being a software provider, it puts us in a really advantageous spot to be able to offer these solutions because we don't need to go out and build stores, right? We just are software that sits on traditional ATMs or integrates into existing POS terminals.
Got it. That makes sense. I'm excited to see the other retailers, and I'm sure you guys got that on the roadmap. The next question I have, obviously Bitcoin, I can go buy, now sell. Are there plans to add other cryptos, the altcoins like Ethereum, XRP, Litecoin, things like that?
Mm-hmm. So most of our product roadmap is driven by consumer demand, and in the full cycle, I think it was 2017. We had a lot of interest from people that were asking about Ethereum, Litecoin, etc., and that really dropped off afterwards. And even today, we don't have too much of that. Definitely open to selling other tokens. The challenge is, can we provide that same quality experience to the consumer? Because for a lot of people, we're the first time that they're purchasing crypto, or sure, in our case, Bitcoin. And that's when your preconceived notions are formed, and that a lot of people won't even try more than once. So it's really important, especially for the broader industry, to have a really, really good and positive experience, especially for word of mouth. So as of today, no plans to add anything else. But as we see more and more demand and requests, it's something that we can add. If you think about kind of our core competency, it's this network to accept payments and deliver something digitally. So it's not difficult for us to add additional services like that. We just have to make sure that we're able to offer the same quality service, because people really use us for two reasons. The first is convenience. We have over 25,000 locations around the country where you can purchase Bitcoin in person instantly. And the second part is trust. It's interesting that Bitcoin is a digital asset, right? So you theoretically don't need to go anywhere to get it. But what we found is when you're handing over real money, knowing that you're at the store that you normally buy groceries from, or at the ATM that you normally take cash from, it gives you a little bit more of something that you can relate to. And I think that's really important, especially for people that are trying digital currencies for the first time.
Yeah, it's a great point. Trust and what resonates with folks makes sense, right? Not everyone is going to be sophisticated and maybe go on a crypto exchange, but they would feel more confident, as that they haven't heard of, right? But it would be more confident to go into a CVS and, to your point, like a RiteAid and so forth, and do the transaction there. So that absolutely makes sense, and I certainly understand the demand aspect of, okay, you guys are going to do Bitcoin, right? But if you see the demand coming for Ethereum, XRP, whatever, you'll add that at a later point, maybe in a crawl, walk, run phase rollout.
Okay. Yeah. Also, once you have Bitcoin, it's pretty easy to go from one digital asset to another. So just the pain point isn't as pronounced as it is to get that first on ramp, right? Going from dollars to Bitcoin or dollars to a digital asset, that's the hardest part. Once you have Bitcoin, it's pretty easy to go from one to another. There's a lot of services that offer that. And once again, you don't need to go off your couch, right? You can stay at home and go from BTC to LTC or whatnot.
Awesome. I know 2020 we're pretty much wrapping up now. Anything we can expect from you guys, or maybe into 2021 that you can hint at or drop a quick note on?
Sure. So I think, we're at 25,000 locations. Sounds like a lot, but there's millions of retailers out there. There still are a lot of white spaces that we want to go after. I think historically we've been more of a steak than sizzle company. We build, we integrate, and we have build really quality products, but we haven't done a lot of marketing and going after consumers as aggressively as an eToro, Coinbase, Gemini, if you will. So I think that's definitely an area of focus for us, because now we have the footprint. What was really important for us is, if you hear and learn about LibertyX and you want to go and buy Bitcoin in person, it was really important that when you did look, we had a location close to you. What we wanted to avoid was you look, you don't see one close to you, and then you kind of forget about us, because that's a lost opportunity. Now, especially with our ATM integrations and chain retailer partnerships, I think we have that last mile solved. So there's going to be a lot more around that. And I think cash out will be also a focus for 2021. It'll be really interesting to see if there are different pockets of demand for buying, demand for selling. But yeah, I think it's definitely. I think it's going to be hard to beat 2020 in terms of unpredictability.
Sure.
and just general craziness and sentiment. But we're very excited.
Awesome. So I want to shift gears a bit and talk more about Bitcoin. And obviously, we crossed over $15,000 as today recording, November 5th. And, where do you see Bitcoin next year? I know before we started recording, we were talking about stock to flow model. And, are you a believer in that? And I don't know if you have a price prediction that you can give. If not, that's okay. But I wanted to ask.
Sure. I think I'm always amazed at how much progress has been, is made in the last year, and also how little progress is made over the last 5 years. But I think that we're trending in the right direction. If you told me when we started the business that we would still be focused on the on-ramp part, I'd be a little bit surprised. But I think what we've seen in the last year is, these major enterprise partnerships really taking off. So over the next 5 years, I would think that you're going to see Bitcoin. For us, one of our goals is to bring Bitcoin to every block. I think you're going to really see that play out. In terms of price prediction, I really anything between where we are now and $1 million, I think is in play, and it comes down to just supply and demand. And what you're seeing, and what we talked about a little bit earlier, is more and more companies, they're being asked, well, what's our strategy in crypto, in Bitcoin, and especially with MicroStrategy and Square that are starting to build a treasury position. A lot of companies have cash, right? You look at Apple, Microsoft, they're sitting on cash, and it's probably the lowest returning asset they have. Their stock's appreciating, so they're looking at companies to buy, but generally in a market that's run up so much, you might not be the best, you might not find the best prices. So I think that more companies like Square, maybe taking a small position in Bitcoin, could be very compelling, especially for shareholders. And that really ties up the supply. So when you have the incremental retail consumer or institutional investor that's trying to come up with a way to return alpha for their client base, it's just simple supply and demand. And we've never really seen anything like it. I think if you look back a few years, there was always a few guesses as to why Bitcoin price would take off. And part of it was, it's going to be remittances. It's going to be institutional investors. I think this time it's really just the trifecta of all of the above, and it just feels like there's a lot of positive sentiment and general understanding of what Bitcoin is and it isn't. A lot of the things that have held back Bitcoin in the past, like incorrect perceptions of it being used for money laundering or nefarious activity. Now we have really good blockchain forensic tools that show that's actually not the case, and people use Bitcoin less than US dollar. So I think that once you kind of just check off all the reasons that Bitcoin cannot succeed, you start thinking about, well, how can it? And that's what's really exciting, because the more and more people that come to that conclusion leads to more and more demand. And as we know, the supply is fixed. So that really lights a fire under the price.
Yeah, absolutely. And in total agreement with you there. And I did want to ask, because I saw you tweeted about it, the PayPal news, where we got official confirmation and they're rolling out their crypto trading and services. What are your thoughts about that? And obviously, I think a lot of folks saw it as very bullish and one of the biggest payment companies getting involved.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's definitely great for the ecosystem. The hardest part, right, is building that on-ramp, building a way for people who are not crypto or not crypto native to get exposure. And that, I think that kind of larger picture will play out in the next few years. Obviously, the PayPal solution is custodial. You can't actually withdraw the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people that just want appreciation of the price, like people who would be buying Tesla stock, they don't really need to ever take ownership of that share, right? Just seeing it in their brokerage account is enough for them. And I think that's kind of who PayPal will really cater to. And then, as people buy Bitcoin and learn more about it, maybe they want to take the Bitcoin to a wallet that they control because they really like this idea of being non-custodial, really controlling their money. And then there's other services that can do that. So I think that it's going to be a nice development of what the market actually wants, because for us, we're non-custodial, PayPal's custodial, but what does the market want, right? What do consumers want? And it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out, especially as we have more and more seamless on-ramps on both sides.
Got it. I wanted to ask, and I don't know how much you can speak to this, obviously, regulatory clarity, we have some of it in the United States. This year we saw the OCC give the banks the ability to custody crypto. But there's still folks waiting on additional clarity. Did you guys have to get any type of regulatory clarity to set up your network and your business and get things in the different retailers? And have you been participating in trying to lobby like politicians or anything to get them to pass crypto regulations?
Sure. And that's really probably the first thing that we did when we got started 6 years ago. It was engaging with regulators. And part of it, that's why we decided to launch our business in Massachusetts, because at the time we believed it to be one of the most favorable environments to start a business in Bitcoin. And we're on the Conference of State Bank Supervisors FinTech Advisory Panel. So that group is comprised of the commissioners of every state regulator. So we're very close to the regulations and changes and what's developing around that. And I'd say, yeah, it's obviously a important part of any crypto company's business model and approach. So for there, we don't really, we're not big into lobbying, but we definitely support other companies in the space. We work with them a lot, as well as with the states. And I think that I actually would say that there is pretty good clarity. It's just that, some people might not agree with it. They don't think they need to be licensed. And for us, it's not really for us to say whether we should be or not. I think for us, we know that there's this opportunity to provide on-ramps and off-ramps, right? And every day that goes by and it's still hard to buy Bitcoin, I think stunts the adoption of the industry. So for us, whatever the rules are, we see the opportunity as a way to make it easier so that it's as easy as buying, a stock on Robinhood or, moving dollars between your bank, dollars between accounts at the same bank. We want it to be as easy to buy and sell Bitcoin as it is to do any of those.
Got it. Absolutely makes sense. And it's great to hear you guys have been engaged with regulators since the beginning. That's awesome. I wanted to ask and get your thoughts on this because it's kind of happening under the radar. There's always the talks of, China is controlling a lot of the hash rates with Bitcoin and so forth. But here in the United States, there have been talks of what's happening in Texas and Whinstone building the world's largest Bitcoin mining farm. And Peter Thiel's Layer 1 is out there. And there's mining farms and power plants putting excess power into mining Bitcoin. In your circles, since you're on the building side of things, have you heard about that and the mining in the United States, or are you following it? I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely been following it, and I think it's incredibly exciting. It's really energy arbitrage, right? It's you're going into areas that have really, really cheap energy production, potentially excessive energy, and finding a way to effectively arbitrage that opportunity away. And the way you do that is by mining Bitcoin, which then you can use somewhere else in the world. So that's just, I think, incredibly exciting because you're turning something physical and you're providing a financial digital way to take advantage of the opportunity. And I think for people in Texas, for people that have these traditionally very high cost fixed asset businesses, to be able to all of a sudden turn that, with a little bit of configuration to something that can now mine digital assets is great. It's very efficient in terms of revitalizing that whole industry. And I think it's just really a sign that Bitcoin is really here to stay and can become something that's going to be even across borders, right? Because you can do that. If we're talking about Texas in this case, but it could really be any country in the world that has access to cheap, renewable energy, or it doesn't even have to be renewable, just cheap energy, take it and then turn it into something that they can actually use to invest in their economy, buy, sell goods. So it could have, import, export implications as well. And that really leads to a better and more seamless way to do commerce globally.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm excited to see, these mining farms get going here in the United States. And I think it's just my opinion, but I feel there is a geopolitical economic battle happening here behind the scenes. It's not at the forefront, but, maybe between like China and the United States have control of that, but who knows? We'll see as this asset class grows, maybe that becomes even more real.
Yeah, I think, given that China is the largest holder of U.S. Treasuries, it's inevitable that there's going to be some tug and pull about, is there an opportunity here for any one side? And, even outside U.S. and China, right?
Sure.
Any country can get involved. And I think that's what's really interesting, because with competition, it generally leads to, whoever has the best strategy, the best execution rises, and it'll force everybody to have a good solution and to, really invest and think hard about how they want to play in the future of the world.
Sure, sure. So on that note, and the future of the world, and what we've been seeing the central governments doing, and a lot of governments, in fact, trying to build CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And it seems like the disruption that Bitcoin started, right? They're trying to now catch up to make sure that their fiat currency doesn't become irrelevant and trying to digitize it, right? Using blockchain tech. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see it as a benefit to the crypto market, given that the government is going to educate people as to, hey, money can be tokenized and it can be in a wallet, digital, and all that?
Yeah, I see it definitely as a positive. Similar to having more on ramps and off ramps, being able to go from physical to digital assets is a kind of a transformative paradigm shift. And anybody that can help with that onboarding is beneficial for the broader ecosystem. I think a secondary effect is it makes things a lot more auditable.
Sure.
Right. So it becomes, it's the saying, trust but verify. I think in this case, people are increasingly concerned and they want access to see, where their money is going, where it's being spent. Most of the world hasn't really seen crazy inflation. I think that might be changing soon. So as people think about how money works, how the dollar is valued, what are the implications if there was more inflation? Part of that is, well, how can I see how many dollars are out there? And part of having this digital, CBDCs is going to be really helpful for following flows, and also just having an analytical mindset and toolkit to assess exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was just a report somewhere that nobody really had a chance to audit.
Yeah, it's like now everything is going to be in the blockchain, a lot of more interoperability, and to your point, it's just the digital economy, and people will be able to now maybe take their CBDCs or digital fiat and just jump into Bitcoin easily versus, I don't know, they get their government wallets, right, with the CBDC in it, and that might actually boost adoption of crypto, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yep.
Final question, and it's a quick rapid fire. What's your favorite food?
Japanese. Sushi.
Sushi, awesome. What's your favorite musician or band?
I listen to a lot of EDM these days, so they're all remixes. So I don't really have one.
Got it.
Hardwell, Avicii.
Got it. What's your favorite movie? That's
It's a tough one. Yeah. Haven't had too much time. I can't even tell you the last time I seen a movie in the theater.
Or favorite within the past few years, maybe.
I'm always a sucker for like the Marvel series, X-Men, and the like.
Cool. I am too. I grew up reading comic books, all the X-Men comic books, and all that. And finally, what's your favorite hobby when you're not working at LibertyX? What are you doing for fun?
Sure. Well, interestingly, due to the pandemic, I started collecting sports cards again, and it's interesting. It's really taken off in a crazy way. Barry Vaynerchuk, a lot of traditional investors, like are these fractional ownership companies now are acquiring those really, really rare old trading cards. And if you think about it, it has a lot of the properties that make digital currencies really exciting, or Bitcoin, right? Yeah. There's provable scarcity. Not to the same degree, but there are cards that are limited to certain numbers. They have autographs, they have relics on them that are tied to certain events in the past. So it's been pretty interesting, and I think that it goes back to our conversation about physical versus digital. I like the trading cards because I can go home and take them out and take a look at it and admire my increasing collection.
That's awesome, and I don't know if you've seen it, but the Pokemon cards and the money people are
crazy.
It's going nuts. I actually pulled out my Pokemon cards from my parents' basement.
Yeah, I can't imagine how many 30-year-olds are like hitting themselves for throwing those cards away when they were 8.
Yeah.
But did you find any Charizards?
I have. So I have a Japanese Charizard. I want to get that like PSA graded. The English version that I have, though, it's in bad condition, but I'm sure somebody would probably buy it. I think the one that I have that's the most rare is a Dragonite hologram in first edition or something like that. I think
Nice.
that might go for some money. So I'm trying to go get them PSA graded and see what can
Yeah,
happen.
yeah. Well, even if your Charizard is in the worst condition ever, it will sell for a lot. It's just like that, having that physical paper with the dragon on it. That's enough.
Yeah, it's like peeling where you can see the hologram in the back, but it's still.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like horrible. It's not like bent up. It's just like peeling a little bit. But yeah, I'm sure somebody's gonna buy it. You want to buy it, Chris?
Let's talk offline.
Chris, thank you. It's a pleasure chatting with you. I love what you guys are doing and would love to have you back on maybe next year as things progress. And looking forward to testing out in CVS, going and buying some Bitcoin. And like I said, thank you so much.
Thanks for the time, Tony. Appreciate it.